Hey everyone, this is Austin Schur here with We Write About Music, and today I'm so happy to have back on again Winchester 7 and the Runners. They have a brand new EP out. It's called Postcards, and I'm super excited to talk to them all about it. Thank you so much for coming back on. How are you doing today? How's life?
Good, awesome. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
And
man, I'm thrilled to
up
have
and
you.
down a bit.
Yeah, I would say, we don't need to talk about the general landscape of life, but at least you are distracting yourself with amazing new music.
Thank you. That was a part of the idea, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, for everyone out there, the record is called Postcards. It will be officially out on July 7th. We are recording that before then, but I want to dive right in. So,
Sure.
the first question I have really is like, how do you approach the creation of an EP versus a record? Like, is there a difference for you, or is it really just like this is all I got at the moment?
That's a good question. I think of it kind of like from a real indie sense, right?
Sure,
As I understand it, when we go for a record, we're 8 to 10 tracks, maybe 12.
sure.
And anything less becomes a bit of an EP.
Yeah.
So because of production costs, I go less.
Yeah, I don't blame you at
Everything's an
all.
EP.
Look, I listen, I think that's a great decision, but I think at the same time it might be a little bit less pressure on you, and also it kind of prioritizes quality over quantity. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
that's the way
I
I'm looking
think
at it.
absolutely. I think in today's music scape where it's like single, 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 and then you take those singles and you put them on an album and nothing's new, it sort of defeats the
Right.
purpose. But the way that this record flows and the way that you've kind of pivoted your sound, yet kind of held true to that classic like aura of what the band brings is really special. So uh
Thank you.
I want to know like how did you decide at the end like I think the EP should be called Postcards.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is my first solo album, and
Right.
we had talked during the last interview, and I'd mentioned maybe, after we're done with promotion for the band's last album, Waking Giant, I'll do some solo work, and I solely meant for it to be a bit experimental.
Sure.
But it got taken out of context a little bit. The band got heated. We had a little video conference to try to calm
Oh
everybody down,
geez.
and then we got hacked. Next thing we know, we've got the video conference and some voicemails leaking that all take everything
Oh.
out of context. So it kind of started to blow up. And it all was pretty innocent. I was just going to explore a couple different sounding things, a little bit more
Yeah.
pop oriented, some different rhythms. And once everybody was calmed down, we kind of agreed that what we would do is we changed an approach. So um, Phil, our bassist, just played bass, and great job. And
Yeah.
Jack, our drummer, decided to take the producer's chair, and that's a big change for us because usually I'm in more of a producer role where the group produces. So he just said, rather than doing um, some contributions to the writing process, he was just going to try to stay true to whatever it was that I was bringing to the table. So I started just recording a bunch of demos and bringing them out, and we started looking through them for a theme. And we had these like slice of life songs where they kind of fit together neatly, and but they each seemed like a little snapshot. And that started making me think postcards. And I just kind of had this name in my head, and forever I was doing postcards, and it had all these extra words: postcards after midnight, postcards, but
Yeah.
postcard club. And eventually we were just like, yeah, well, let's just call it postcards.
Sure. Well, so I'm a little bit confused because you said this
Sure.
was sort of a solo record, but
Hmm.
but also the band was still involved. How does that
Yeah, well,
what
that's the
sense,
way
I
we do
guess?
things.
Do
It's,
you I mean do you mean in terms of
sure.
like you writing the lyricism and creating the blueprints for the record?
So normally what would happen is I'd write a demo, bring in something to the band, and
Sure.
then we'd kind of workshop it to make it into something. And sometimes I come with no title or a title, some lyric
Yeah.
fragments, a little bit of a, melody, and we build it out together, layering it on. With this one, I had entire songs with all the lyrics and the
Oh.
arrangement ready, and I would just record those as demos, and then we'd pick through them. And at that point, Phil just played bass, and then Jack set about producing the sound to kind of get more into what I was trying to do with each track. They're all a little bit different from
Got
each
it.
other, but it
Okay.
changed things up. So it wasn't the band's album anymore, even though the band's involved.
Dang. Okay. No, no, that fully makes sense. I'm happy that you explained that. I guess in a way, obviously, it differs from the typical record that you've been making in the past, kind of coming in with like, I don't know, 50% done and then putting the
Right.
finishing touches on. I guess from the past until now, has it always been you writing the lyrics?
I think for the most part, usually when I'm stuck for a hook, that's where like the band comes in, and
Sure,
Jack's
sure.
particularly good at that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I'll tend to have a melody and a little bit of a verse, but
Okay.
I'm usually pretty rubbish at choruses. So when it
Sure.
comes to the chorus part, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's this, and he helps, and Phil, they help to contribute to kind of get us
Right.
to a finished song. This time I was like, I'm going to get past that hurdle and I'm going to write my own choruses.
Nice, dude. Listen, I fully respect that. I also think at the same time, you've been doing this for so long, maybe it's coming more natural at some point, you
Could
know?
be. Yeah, it could
Yeah,
be. And a different thing for the mix was we changed. I wanted things to be different than a normal runner's record because it
sure.
was my own. So we also changed up our mix engineer on this one, and happened to have a little bit of good luck in finding a mix engineer who is a drummer in an indie rock band called Coach Party. Excellent
Okay.
drummer,
Cool.
and he sat in on drums on the album. So a
Nice. All
different
right.
drummer and a different mix engineer to help kind of make things just a bit more different.
Right. No, that's awesome. I think this sort of begs the question though of like, considering that you were producing in the past and then producers got swapped out here, I think producers have such a paramount role in the end up sound. And I think at the end of the day,
Yeah,
like if you didn't like something, you'd speak up and say it.
sure.
But like I mentioned when we started, this record definitely has a shift in sound. Like there's new textures and soundscapes and kind of everything, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it still holds true to the original sound. Do you think that the producer swap was like the key factor in that change in sound?
I'm sure Jack thinks so. Um, from my perspective, I can't knock him because I'm pretty happy with his result. So
No, it's
he definitely
fantastic.
did something, right? And
Right.
in some ways, I argue he might be a better producer than a drummer. But
All
he,
right.
he he likes drumming, and I'm sure we'll have him behind the kit one day again.
Sure. Okay. Well, then I want to talk about lyricism here because I do feel
Sure.
like these individual songs are like snapshots of moments. So I guess what directly inspired some of their writings? Like, was it life or just making things up, or what happened here?
Well, it's all very true personally. So,
Sure.
that's probably played into the title. Um, if we look at Just a Crush, that's the lead off track. That's maybe a bit of an anomaly. Um, when my daughter was, I think this goes back about 5 years or more. She was listening to a lot of Taylor Swift, and she started a song, and she was real proud of herself, and I thought it was fantastic. And we just kind of, left it on the shelf a little bit. And I thought, now she's kind of not writing as far as I know, and she's into her teen years and starting to date. Wouldn't it be cool to dust off that song that she wrote, Just a Crush, to kind of have
Absolutely.
my own little fatherly, heartbreak empowerment kind of song,
Yeah.
which I still hear a little bit like Taylor Swift, but nobody else does. So
Listen,
she
I
was a
think
co-writer on that one.
it could definitely have elements, and then your daughter can go to school and say, "Hey, I'm a songwriter, so check that
Yeah,
out,"
yeah, she's got her
which is
ASCAP now,
it's
and
pretty amazing. Oh, really?
yes, so that's kind of neat. Yeah, pretty cool. And
That
then
is super cool.
for some of the others, I'd love to be able to have all my bills paid by music, but
Yeah.
pending more listeners, I have to keep the
Right.
day job, and the day job started getting pretty dicey. So I think that found itself into some of the lyrics,
Sure.
particularly like "Still Waters" or "Holiday." "Holiday" was like I really want a vacation, and a little bit of that return to office thing that we're hearing people struggling with.
Yeah.
So that made it into those songs, and then right as we're ramping up for the release, I got laid off recently. So I'm hoping to
Very sorry
find.
to hear that.
Yeah, thanks. These things happen, but I'm confident I'm going to find something soon. And in the meantime, I'm focused on promoting the record anyway. So I think in a lot of
Nice.
ways, it brings about true to form postcards.
Absolutely. Listen, I always appreciate the explanations of the songs. I think nowadays things are either in your face or completely, blurred the lines of you kind of you give it your own meaning based on the words that are happening here. So I'm happy
Yeah.
to know that these songs are kind of individual, but as a whole, I wouldn't necessarily call this a concept record, but I do feel that it
Mm.
it did flow lyrically from song to song. Maybe not
It's good to hear.
always in the lyrics. No, really, like maybe not always in the lyrics, but in the sound and overall style of the record.
Oh,
I don't know if
great.
that could be attributed to it just being an EP and there being less songs to kind of like meander over time, but
Mhm.
it does feel like a very complete work, which I think is important.
Oh, thank
What
you.
what I'm trying to get to though in that like explanation was the last song here.
Uh-huh.
I'll say this in quotes, kind of goes off the rails in terms of like adding these synthesizers and these like really like moody production textures.
Oh, you
What
again?
was Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, that's a cover of a song by a band called the Lottery Winners.
Oh, well, I was not aware of
And
that.
yeah, I really liked their song. And that was a funny one because I wanted to do a cover. We've started with the Runners, we would always add a cover at the end of every album for the most part. And I thought I'd do the same for this. And a lot of times with the Runners, we would pick something that is pretty old school, or
Sure.
maybe something that kind of feels like the thing that we might just be jamming about in rehearsals and decided to
Right.
record. This time I was like, I'm going to try to find something that's very modern and very different from what I would normally do. So I heard You Again, thought it was terribly catchy, and thought, let
Agreed.
me take a swing at that. And what I found was that it was fun to do, a little bit more dancey. But if you hear the melody or you listen to the original, you might say, well, that's a pretty straightforward vocal. It doesn't have a lot of variation to it. And
Sure.
when I actually set about doing it, I found, oh my God, it's actually more difficult than it seems, which is probably the mark of a good song. So I enjoy doing it.
I would agree. I also think, yeah, the first thing I'm going to do when we hang up is go listen to that song because I wasn't aware it was a cover, but I really
Yeah,
enjoyed
yeah.
it. Like,
Thanks.
I'll make sure to give you my feedback because I'm sure you
Oh, please.
took your liberties with it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it rocked fully.
Thanks.
Nice. I guess, considering that you've added these covers to records in the past, is it
Mhm.
always a tough time considering like, oh, I don't know what to pick because there's so many coverable songs out there, or did you just,
Yeah.
happen upon this one?
That's a great question. I think in the running, I was down to maybe a couple of different ones I was thinking about doing, but I picked this one because it just felt it was the most different. It was the most unexpected, and
Sure.
you know, that was really kind of the goal with doing the solo record was do things differently.
Right.
So rather than doing a cover song that sounded like to have been done by the Runners, and indeed, we had Jack behind the kit to do a recording on a cover that we just kind of were doing while we were rehearsing. Maybe it'll find its way on a future Runners record. But we set about doing this one with the idea that this is unexpected, and
Sure.
let's give it a try.
That
So it
man,
had a little bit
very
of
solid choice.
without a net kind of feeling to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Were there any songs during the recording sessions that maybe got left on the cutting room floor that you'd like to use on future records potentially?
That's a great question. I have a playlist on a YouTube channel of me recording all the demos, and
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's twice as many songs that ended up on the record over in those, and probably some that I didn't get as far as recording on. But yeah, there's a bunch of them there. I always like them all,
Sure.
but they didn't fit on this record. So maybe one day they'll see the light of day.
Okay.
But in the meantime, just keep writing,
There
working
you
on
go.
something new now, and that might just be a single for the hell of it.
All right. I mean, yeah, listen, a creative never stops creating. Those ideas never
Hopefully.
stop flowing wherever you are. It might take time. You might hit writer's block. Something might come up, but at the end of the day, that's what you want to do.
Right. Very much
Not
so.
to not to ruffle any feathers here, but it sounds like for the most part you took on a brunt of the work here, creating basically full songs. Would you ever consider doing an actual solo album, something that maybe doesn't have a full band, maybe something more acoustic or something along those lines?
No, that's a great question. I think across time I've really gotten into, the layers of the recording process.
Yeah,
So the idea of, just me and my acoustic, maybe. I think the closest I came was Still Waters on this track, really. It started
sure.
off as a very acoustic track, very much ukulele. And then
Yeah,
I ended up adding on an electric lead part and,
right.
bass and drums. And before I knew it, it was a little
Yeah,
bit different. But,
sure.
if you listen to the original recording in the playlist of demos, you can get a sense of what it might sound like. It's just acoustic. And
Cool.
if there's a fan ask for that, maybe one day.
Well, listen, that's all the reason to create an extended deluxe version of the EP
All
where
right.
it's all the demos and outtakes and things like that. And listen, I think we're so far in the future of music production technology that you have these solo artists out there that create full band sounds just with the click of a button. And I know that it kind of takes away from the organic feel of like being in a room or a studio with the band, but it does give you full creative freedom to kind of do whatever you want. Although in my preference, I definitely prefer the full band experience.
I think that's a good point. I like playing the full band, but I love the recording aspect of it. So I think
Yeah,
I'm somewhat of a hybrid, right? There's
sure.
some stuff that we do in the box effect wise, but most of what ends up on the record, I think, is largely the sound that's being recorded very analog. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
being recorded into Pro Tools, but it's an analog track, and I think on this record particularly, I tried to get full takes. So
sure.
end to end, recording it in one take was a thing that I said about trying to do. I think we probably did some comping and some overdubbing here and there. Particularly with you again, I think I took 3 tries on getting that vocal right.
Hey man, that's the
But
recording process.
that's the recording process, right?
Yeah, I mean that happens. I love that. Besides the closer, is there a song on this record that you're most looking forward to people listening to? One that's, really got you excited.
Sure. I personally like Still Waters a lot. That was
Yeah.
the last track that I wrote. Um, Originally, the record was set to go without it. And as I was listening to it, I'm going, it's great. I'd really like one more track. I don't really have anything else that fits. And a colleague of mine was like, well, you haven't written anything in a little bit. Why don't you just write something new? I'm like, well, I mean, I'm trying this thing. I've got it all fleshed out.
Yeah.
And he started talking about, well, your experience on work here might be a thing that you could write about. I'm like, yeah, all right.
It's a
So
sore subject. You know what I'm
yeah, but
saying?
it has well, that's why I like the song because it ends up
Yeah,
having a lot of genuineness to it, authenticity. Is also another thing that I really think about when you hear a lot of people who are losing their jobs or having trouble in the
right.
economy. It's easy to get down in the dumps about it. So I wanted that instead of having that. I tend to think if you write a negative song, it's like waves, and I wanted something a little bit different because got to counter that a little. So I had this idea of it might be still waters, but they still go somewhere, and eventually
Sure.
catch some wind in your sails, and off you go. So I think
I
we could all use
agree.
a little wind.
I mean, from a songwriter's perspective, do you think it's always necessary to like go out and live life to garner those experiences to write about, or is it okay to kind of like dig in your own personal well for content?
That's a great question. I tend to think that everybody's got a little bit of themselves in everything, even if they're making it up.
Yeah,
So if we're making up a character and we're writing a song about it, there's going to be some of your experience that makes it into it in
sure.
any event. So I don't think it has to be, really a journal. But there's always a bit of you that makes it.
I agree. I mean, whether you like it or not, you know what I mean? It's uh
Yeah.
you and I know so much music out there is like, what random story can I create that is just catchy and poppy and bring it together? But like
Sure.
when I listen to music, I always prioritize lyricism because I think it's so important to like, even though I don't know the artist or know you super well, it gives me a glimpse into your life. Like you feel the connection because the song is so great to listen to, but really like it's snapshots of people's lives that are ultimately strangers.
Well, that's the hope. I,
Right.
I
Though the
know I
hope is
spend
for
a
them to
lot of
care
time on the
enough.
lyrics,
Yeah,
right? I spend a lot of time on the lyrics because
sure.
I think I always say that there's a thin line between a good song and bad high school poetry. So,
That is
you
so,
got to work
that is
it
so
until it
true.
actually rocks.
Yes, so true. Oh man. Wow, I've never thought about it like that, but dang, that line is thin because there's some
It
bad stuff out
can
there.
go wrong real quick.
Yeah, very, very true. I have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
What does the rest of this year look like? Obviously, this record is releasing basically right at the halfway point.
Mhm.
Um, what's going on for the second half?
Well, as I say, I have this new track I'm working on. I'm thinking it'll be a single. It might find its way onto another solo album. The Runners and I have been talking about doing an album of just covers, taking some of what we've already done, that one that we already
Yeah,
put in the can, and maybe doing a little cover album might be
that'd be
fun.
amazing.
Um, but we haven't talked about doing a full new album of new original material yet.
Sure.
I think I'm more inclined to keeping this formula for a little bit because I'm having fun with it.
Nice.
But we're gonna do some more of that, and I think some collaborations. On this track, on this album, there were a few tracks that I brought in different collaborators, including some real strong female vocalists. And I liked the way that added to the sound, so I might look to try to work with one of them again
Nice. That'd be really
or
cool.
others.
And I think having, going back to the idea of a covers album could be
Yeah,
great for the band because it's less pressure for everyone. You don't feel the
that's what we were
need
talking about.
to,
Yeah,
it's less pressure. And like if there's, riffs in the band or anything like that, it kind of gives people an outlet to express themselves and have fun with something that they're familiar with. Maybe like bring it back to the old days of
sure.
pre-original music.
It brings us back to where we started because every band, when they
Exactly.
start, don't start with their original tune. Usually you're
No, they're
jamming
playing
some
old
songs
Led
you know.
Zeppelin songs or
Right.
whatever the
And
hell
that's
it
the way we
is.
did it.
Exactly.
So,
I love
that's
that,
we
man.
it's like a little bit of a return to roots, if you will.
Cool. Lastly, is there anything on this record that maybe I didn't ask about that you think is super important for people to know before they listen?
Super important. Well,
Not super important, but just
um,
like, hey, you should know this.
I think one thing that maybe isn't super important, but I like is that I if you look at the cover of the album, I think that's the thing in the digital age. We don't spend a lot of time with like the album artwork anymore.
Yeah,
I
you're not
always remembered
holding it.
grabbing an album and studying the cover and trying to
Right.
figure out what clues there were to it.
I do that
Um,
every time I listen to a record.
there you go. So I still try to make covers that are like that. I actually do the cover art myself.
Awesome. I didn't know that.
So
That's
yeah, all the
important.
albums for the
That's
runners I've
incredibly
done.
important.
Thanks. So I spent a lot of time on it, and on this one, um, I made little postcards for each of the songs, and then when I shot the album cover, it's actually an older photo I'd taken. I put the little postcards on the beach. So each of the singles has its own postcard, and then
Sure.
the album cover has them all combined in one
Very
place.
cool.
And I think there's lots of AI and fun graphic tricks you can do, but one of the
Yeah.
things I was proud of is that the main components of all of these postcards are actual photos I've taken. So
Very,
they're
very
from all
cool.
different places. There's some
Sure.
Hawaii, there's some Las Vegas. I got one from the Giant's Causeway over in Northern Ireland, stuff like that. So it's
Hell
kind
yeah,
of,
man.
they really legitimately are postcards.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, listen, before we wrap up, I obviously want to thank you so much for coming on. It's always so nice talking to you.
Thank you.
But
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
thank you. But I wanna plug the music for you. So for
Thank
everyone
you.
out there, the record officially releases on July 7th. It's called Postcards. The band is Winchester 7 and the Runners. And as always, we will have the links so that you can listen and share and follow along. Stay tuned for more, whether it be isolated singles, performances, whatever it might be. Everything will be on social media for you to see. Didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did. So, um, listen, thank you so much for your time. I super appreciate it.
Thank you. Likewise.
You're welcome. All
And
right,
I
have an
think maybe you got
amazing.
some lyrics in you too.
Yeah, maybe I do. Maybe I should write a record. We'll see. Um, listen, have a great rest of your day. Stay cool out there,
You
and I
too.
hope to speak soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.